Welcome to Horrific Stories. Today's tale is a terrifying journey filled with suspense and chilling twists. If you love horror, don't forget to subscribe for more spine-tingling tales. In a small, weathered town, there was an old urban legend about mirrors. Whispers claimed that if you looked into a mirror in the dark and said, "Show me your truth," you would see something horrifying. Not your reflection, but the thing watching you from the other side. Lucy, a skeptic with a fascination for debunking ghost stories, decided to test the legend. One stormy night, armed with nothing but a flashlight and her curiosity, she locked herself in the bathroom. The flickering candlelight gave the room an eerie glow as she faced the antique mirror her grandmother had warned her about. "Show me your truth," she whispered mockingly. At first, nothing happened. She laughed, turning to leave. But as her hand reached for the door, the light in the room dimmed, and the air grew heavy. A soft, raspy whisper echoed behind her. "Don't look." Her heart pounded as fear gripped her. Against her better judgment, Lucy turned back to the mirror. Her reflection was gone. In its place was a shadowy figure, its hollow, glowing eyes staring directly at her. It raised a bony finger and pointed at her. Paralyzed with terror, she realized the whisper wasn't coming from the figure in the mirror. It was coming from behind her. She dared not move, but the pressure of unseen hands pushed her closer to the glass. Her breath fogged the mirror as the figure leaned forward and mouthed one final word: "Mine." The next morning, Lucy's friends found the bathroom empty. The mirror was cracked, and written across it in smeared lipstick were the words, "Don't look." Lucy was never seen again, but those who lived in the house claimed to hear soft whispers at night and see faint handprints forming on their mirrors. And when they looked too closely, sometimes the reflection didn't match their movements at all. Emma had just moved into a historic Victorian-era house. The place was charming, but came with an odd feature: a massive, ornate mirror in the hallway. The realtor claimed it was as old as the house itself, but Emma found it unsettling. Whenever she passed by, it felt like her reflection lingered just a second too long. One night, after unpacking boxes late into the evening, Emma noticed something strange. As she walked past the mirror, her reflection didn't mimic her stride. It stopped, frozen, staring back at her, its expression cold and unfamiliar. Emma chalked it up to exhaustion and decided to head to bed. But sleep wouldn't come. Throughout the night, soft tapping sounds echoed through the hallway. When she mustered the courage to investigate, she found nothing out of place, except the mirror, now slightly tilted on its mount, as though something had pushed it from behind. The next day, Emma tried covering the mirror with a blanket, but that night, she woke to the sound of something whispering her name. The blanket was on the floor, and her reflection was standing in the glass, grinning. Panicked, Emma called a local historian, who told her the mirror was rumored to be cursed. The original owner had trapped a vengeful spirit inside it to save himself. The spirit was said to mimic its victims until it could replace them entirely. Desperate, Emma tried to destroy the mirror, but no matter what she did, hammer, fire, or water, the glass remained unscathed. That night, as she stared into it one final time, her reflection reached out of the glass and pulled her in. Days later, Emma's friends came to check on her but found only an empty house. The mirror hung there, spotless and perfectly intact. But now, Emma's face could sometimes be seen staring out from within, her eyes pleading for help that would never come. Emily was a weary traveler, passing through a remote town on her way to visit her family. As night fell, she decided to stop at a small roadside motel. The sign flickered faintly. "Welcome to Pine Hollow Inn." It was cheap, clean enough, and seemed like the perfect place to crash for the night. The desk clerk, An older man with a peculiar gaze handed her a key to room 237. "You're the only guest tonight," he said with an awkward smile. "Sleep well." Room 237 was plain but cozy, save for one detail. A tall, ornate mirror stood in the corner, its frame tarnished with age. Emily found it odd that such an antique would be in such a modest room, but she shrugged it off and went about unpacking. As she prepared for bed, she noticed the mirror again. It was unusually spotless, as though it had just been polished. When she moved closer, she thought she saw movement in the glass. A flicker, like someone passing behind her. Spinning around, she found the room empty. "Get a grip," she muttered and climbed into bed. At 3 a.m., she awoke to a strange sensation, like she was being watched. The room was silent, but a faint glow came from the mirror. She sat up, squinting in the dark, and saw her reflection sitting still, staring back at her. Emily froze. Her reflection was smiling. Panic set in as she scrambled for the light. When she turned it on, her reflection returned to normal. Shaking, she convinced herself it was just a dream or her imagination playing tricks. She grabbed a towel from the bathroom and threw it over the mirror. The next morning, she woke feeling groggy. The towel had fallen to the floor, and the mirror was uncovered. Across the glass, in smeared condensation, were the words, "Leave before dawn." Terrified, Emily packed her bags, determined to get out of there. But as she tried to leave, the doorknob wouldn't turn. The room felt colder, and her reflection appeared again, but this time it didn't move as she did. Instead, it pointed to something behind her. Her breath hitched as she turned around slowly. The room was empty, except for the mirror, which now showed her reflection holding a knife. Her reflection's lips moved, though no sound came out. "Let me in!" Emily screamed, backing away until she bumped into the dresser. The lights flickered, and the mirror began to distort. Her reflection stepped forward, closer and closer, until its hand pressed against the glass. A loud crack echoed through the room, and the mirror shattered. When the desk clerk checked the room later, it was empty. No signs of Emily, no belongings, and no broken glass. The mirror was back in its place, pristine and spotless. The next guest who stayed in room 237 found a single message etched faintly into the mirror's surface. "Don't stay here. Don't look in the mirror." The Harris family had just moved into their new home, an old Victorian house that had stood on the outskirts of town for over a century. The house was large, with creaky floors and dimly lit corners, and it had a certain charm. The walls were adorned with faded wallpaper, and the air always seemed to have a musty scent. But to Emma and her family, it was perfect. After years of apartment living, they were excited to settle into their dream home. However, from the very first night, things felt off. Strange noises echoed through the house late at night, scratching sounds from the attic, soft footsteps that seemed to follow them wherever they went. At first, Emma thought it was just the house settling, the wind causing the old beams to creak. But soon, the noises grew more distinct, more purposeful. It was Emma's 8-year-old daughter, Lily, who was the first to mention it. She'd always been sensitive to things others couldn't see, but this time, Emma couldn't dismiss it as an overactive imagination. One evening, as Emma tucked Lily into bed, the little girl whispered, "Mom, there's something in the attic. I saw it." Emma tried to brush it off. "It's just the wind, sweetie. Old houses make weird noises." But Lily was adamant. "No, Mom, it was a man. I saw his shadow in the window. He's trapped in there." That night, Emma found herself lying awake in bed, listening to the same strange noises coming from the attic. The thought of a person being trapped there sent a shiver down her spine. When her husband, Tom, came home from work the next day, she mentioned it to him. He just laughed it off, calling it the house's personality, and promised to have a look in the attic the next weekend. The next evening, Emma decided to investigate herself. She stood in front of the old attic door, which was locked. The key had been missing since they moved in, and the door itself felt unnaturally cold. She shivered and put her ear against it. Nothing, just silence. Curiosity got the best of her, and she decided to unlock the door herself. As she did, she noticed something strange about the door frame, a faint, almost imperceptible crack in the wood. It was as if the house was trying to hide something. The moment she stepped inside, she felt the temperature drop. It wasn't just cold, it was icy, a deep chill that seemed to cut through her bones. The attic was full of old furniture, dusty boxes, and forgotten items. But what caught her attention was an old mirror standing in the far corner. Its surface was covered in grime, and the reflection barely showed anything except the dim light of the single bulb hanging overhead. Emma approached the mirror, feeling drawn to it. As she wiped away the dust with her sleeve, she gasped. The reflection wasn't of her face. It was a shadowy figure looming just behind her, distorted and barely visible. She spun around, but there was nothing there. Her heart raced as she backed away from the mirror. Just then, she noticed something else. An old journal, lying on the floor next to the mirror. She picked it up, feeling the weight of its age. The pages were yellowed and fragile, and the ink was faded, but the words were still legible. It told the story of the house's original owner, a man named Victor Blackwood, who had built the house in the late 1800s. He was a recluse, rumored to have practiced strange rituals in the attic. One day, he disappeared without a trace, and the house was left abandoned for years. The journal hinted at dark forces at work, forces that were tied to the attic and the strange shadows that seemed to linger there. As Emma read, the room grew darker. The air became heavier, and the shadows in the corners seemed to stretch toward her. She could hear whispers, low and unintelligible, crawling into her ears. Panicked, she dropped the journal and stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest. Suddenly, she saw it. His face, pale and gaunt, staring at her from the mirror. His eyes were wide with terror, as if he were trying to warn her. The reflection flickered, and for a moment, Emma swore she saw the man's hand reach out toward her. Frightened, Emma bolted out of the attic, slamming the door shut behind her. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew one thing for certain. The house was not empty. The thing in the attic wasn't just a ghost, it was something far worse. The next few days were a blur of unease. The noises grew louder, more desperate. Lily began to act strangely, speaking in whispers to someone no one else could see. She would stand at the window of her room for hours, staring into the darkness as if waiting for something, or someone. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the presence in the attic was growing stronger, more insistent. That night, she couldn't take it any longer. She returned to the attic, determined to end whatever was happening. This time, she brought Tom with her. They stood in front of the mirror together, but the reflection showed only darkness. It was as if the mirror was feeding on their fear, pulling them deeper into the shadows. Suddenly, Tom shouted, "Look!" He pointed toward the floor, where a dark shape was forming in the center of the room. The shadow seemed to take shape, becoming a human figure, tall, thin, and covered in tattered clothing. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. It was Victor Blackwood. The figure's mouth opened, and a voice echoed through the attic. "You shouldn't have come here. You freed me." Before Emma could react, the mirror shattered with a deafening crash, and the shadow lunged at them. The room erupted in chaos as the air grew thick with a suffocating darkness. In the days that followed, the Harris family fled the house, leaving behind everything. The house was abandoned once again, but the legend of Victor Blackwood lived on. The attic was sealed shut, but the whispers in the walls remained, a haunting reminder of the man who never left. And as for the mirror, it was found years later, deep in the woods behind the house. The glass was shattered, but the reflection inside was clear. an endless, swirling vortex, waiting for the next curious soul to unlock the door. Thanks for watching Horrific Stories. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more spine-tingling stories. Until next time, keep your lights on and your fears closed.